There's a special kind of bad when a war film offends the veterans who lived it. Some of these movies butchered history, some just butchered common sense. A Spike Lee film pissed off an entire country, and Spielberg directed the movie so bad, even John Wayne called it anti-American drivel. These are the 10 worst World War II films ever made, and every single one of them earned it. Spike Lee had big ambitions for this one. He wanted to tell the story of African-American soldiers in World War II Italy, specifically focusing on the St. Anna massacre. But here's the catch. He decided to fictionalize what really happened. In the movie, the massacre is triggered by a local Italian resistance fighter betraying his own people, which sounds dramatic, except it never happened. The real massacre was proven by a 2005 tribunal to be purely a Nazi war crime, planned and executed deliberately, with no provocation at all. When Italian historians and surviving resistance fighters saw Spike Lee's fictional twist, they were furious, called it a betrayal. But Lee refused to apologize. Instead, he doubled down, basically telling Italians to confront their past. But even beyond the historical mess, the movie itself wasn't good. Critics said it was way too long, totally inconsistent, jumping from brutal violence to mystical scenes and soap opera drama. Miracle at St. Anna was well-meaning, trying to honor black soldiers, but ended up just being historically irresponsible and narratively sloppy. Imagine having $65 million, Bruce Willis and Adrian Brody, and still managing to create an absolute dumpster fire of a movie. That's basically Airstrike. Set in 1943, it tells the story of the Japanese bombing of a Chinese city. Willis plays Jack, an American airman training Chinese pilots, giving these cringeworthy motivational speeches, and somehow Adrian Brody is involved in all this too. The result is such a spectacular mess it scored a perfect 0 on Rotten Tomatoes. The film went through massive re-edits after production issues, and you can tell story makes 0 sense. The dubbing's terrible, CGI looks cartoonish, and Bruce Willis seems like he's cashing in the laziest check of his career. Chinese audiences hated it so much, theaters quickly yanked it and dumped it online instead. Critics call it possibly the single worst World War II movie ever created. I wouldn't argue with them. Spielberg's done a lot of masterpieces, but 1941 is definitely not one of them. It's a World War II comedy about people in California panicking right after Pearl Harbor, but instead of being funny, it's basically stupid and annoying. You'd think with John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, and Ned Beatty it'd at least be watchable. But no, critics shredded it, said it was a mess that confused slapstick for humor. Military viewers said it was badly acted, not even slightly funny. Spielberg later admitted in a documentary it was his worst career mistake, calling reactions like I'd committed a war crime. Even John Wayne hated it. Spielberg actually offered Wayne a role early on, but Wayne read the script, got seriously angry, and called it the most anti-American piece of drivel he'd ever seen. Financially, it didn't even come close to Spielberg's earlier hits. Sure, it made about $95 million, but compared to his previous movies that had earned around $780 million combined, that was a huge drop. Today, it's mostly remembered as a textbook example of how to completely screw up a war comedy. This one had so much potential. George Lucas himself was behind it. He produced it, even personally directed some extra scenes, and the story was supposed to highlight the Tuskegee Airmen, America's first African-American fighter pilots. But instead of digging into real historical issues and the racism these pilots faced, the movie just throws in a few corny speeches and generic dogfights. Critics saw right through it, saying it totally missed the point. Instead of honoring the real Tuskegee Airmen's struggles, Red Tails became just another superficial war flick with flat characters, cheesy dialogue, and endless cliches. Even though it meant well, the film got shredded, only 40% on Rotten Tomatoes. People found it shallow, and lots of viewers mistakenly assumed everything shown actually happened historically. In reality, many events were completely fictionalized. Another true story, but this one, instead of honoring survivors, turned into an embarrassing disaster. It's about the USS Indianapolis, a ship sunk by a Japanese submarine after delivering atomic bomb parts in World War II. Hundreds of crew members were stranded fighting to survive shark-infested waters. Sounds intense, right? Well, not in this movie. Instead, Nicolas Cage, who usually can make anything at least fun to watch, gives maybe his most bored performance ever. CGI sharks look straight out of a sci-fi channel movie, acting is stiff, dialogue is painfully bad, and the tone jumps all over. They even forced in a pointless love triangle and cheesy one-liners that totally undermine how harrowing the real incident was. Critics hated it, and one review put it perfectly. Not exactly unwatchable, but completely not worth watching. It got only an 18% rating from critics, completely flopped in theaters, spent about $40 million to make, earned less than $2 million. In the end, this film didn't honor anyone. It just became famous as a notoriously awful World War II movie. Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor is famous mostly for being ridiculously inaccurate and turning a huge World War II tragedy into a melodramatic love story. Basically, Bay took the Pearl Harbor attack, one of the defining moments of the war, and squeezed it into a soap opera triangle between Ben Affleck, Josh Hartnett, and Kate Beckinsale. The historical accuracy here is pretty much zero. Historians tore it apart. Veterans were absolutely furious. One survivor of a Japanese prisoners of war camp even called it insulting and disgusting, saying the film completely ignored the men who actually fought and died there. Another veteran flat out said watching it was like a slap in the face to his actual experience at Pearl Harbor. And it's not just the love story. This film is full of inaccuracies, like showing two pilots practically winning the whole battle themselves. Doesn't matter how good the visuals are, critics destroyed it anyway. And Rotten Tomatoes gave it a measly 24%. Sure, the big attack sequence looks cool, Bay knows his explosions, but when you screw up history this badly, people aren't going to forgive it easily. This movie sounds like it should have been awesome. Roger Moore, Telly Savalas, David Niven, Elliot Gould, all these huge stars set on a Nazi-occupied Greek island. It's part camp breakout movie, part heist for stolen art, and part goofy comedy. Problem is, none of those parts actually fit together. It's like the filmmakers couldn't decide what they wanted, so you get weird motorcycle chases, corny one-liners, even a bizarre disco-style dance number out of nowhere. And nothing makes sense together. One Rotten Tomatoes user summed it up perfectly, saying it felt like the studio just sent all these famous actors on vacation to a Greek island, filmed whatever they felt like, and called it a movie. Critics tore into this thing, called it silly, tone-deaf, and completely disrespectful to its World War II setting. It's widely seen as exactly how not to do a war comedy, totally trivializes the history, wastes a great cast, and honestly just feels embarrassing. Speaking of embarrassing, let's talk The Misfit Brigade. Supposedly based on a novel about a German penal unit on the Eastern Front, but this movie turns all that into a weird mashup of violent action scenes and goofy slapstick comedy, and none of it works. You've got a crew of convicted German soldiers on a suicide mission, so far so good, but then suddenly they're rescuing kittens in bombed-out buildings and delivering corny punchlines. The humor's supposed to be dark, I guess, but it's actually just awkward and cringeworthy. Even production values were terrible. They used cheap Yugoslav tanks to stand in for authentic German armor. Everything looks low-budget, cheap, and lazy. Critics hated it, war historians hated it. Basically, nobody was happy. Shining Through, starring Michael Douglas, Melanie Griffith, and Liam Neeson, actually won the Golden Raspberry for Worst Picture, so you already know what you're getting into. The setup sounds promising. Melanie Griffith's an American secretary going undercover as a spy in Nazi Germany. But then, the actual movie is completely ridiculous. Griffith's spy character literally bakes pies for a Nazi officer while secretly gathering intel. Just one example of how absurd it gets. Critics especially went after Griffith's performance. Her accent was all over the place, her character completely unbelievable, and she just came off as clueless. Then you've got Michael Douglas as her Nazi boss, and of course there's a clumsy romance subplot between them. It's like the filmmakers checked off every bad Hollywood cliché in the book: sappy romance, dumb scenarios, zero historical logic. Reviewers called it overblown and treacly, and basically everyone agrees this is one of the worst World War II movies ever made. John Woo directing Nicolas Cage in a movie about Navajo code talkers sounds great, right? Well, it should have been, but instead of actually focusing on Navajo soldiers, the studio made it mostly about Cage's character, a fictional white Marine protecting one of the code talkers. Critics and Native American groups immediately called it out for burying an important true story beneath typical Hollywood action cliches. There's slow-motion gunfights, big explosions, and totally invented drama like a made-up order to kill your code talker if capture was imminent. Roger Ebert specifically pointed out that the real Navajo heroes were completely sidelined. But apparently that wasn't even John Woo's fault. Woo himself later said the studio basically forced him to make a big flashy action movie. He wanted something deeper, a serious film about friendship and trauma, but they demanded explosions and heroics every few minutes. The studio just didn't care, so the final product satisfied basically nobody. Not Woo, not historians, and definitely not audiences.